Let me tell you something. There's nothing quite like getting sued by a woman who thinks she owns your house when you don't even live in her precious HOA. The day those legal papers landed on my porch, I was still half convinced it was all some over-caffeinated neighbor's power trip. But when the threats started stacking up and the fines kept showing up in my mailbox one after another, I realized I wasn't dealing with your run-of-the-mill nosy neighbor. I was staring down the self-appointed queen of a kingdom she didn't even own, and she was determined to rule over my property whether I liked it or not. I'm Grant 35, ex-City Hall grunt, and let me tell you, after 10 years wrangling with zoning nightmares, I thought I'd seen it all. My plan was simple: retire early, fix up a battered old house in the suburbs, and finally get a little peace. That house had seen better days, siding faded by sun, a mailbox leaning like it was about to retire, with me porch steps that creaked under my golden retriever buddy. But I loved it like an old Chevy with too many miles and too many memories. Little did I know I'd parked right next to the boss level of HOA nightmares, Denise Sterling. First time I saw her, she was on her lawn with a ruler shouting at some poor kid for parking a couple inches over the curb. There was this calculating look in her eyes, always searching for the next thing to fix. Denise lived in the biggest house on the corner her yard nearly, but crucially not quite touching my own. And to get to my house, I had to cut through the neighborhood. It wasn't a scenic drive, just the shortest path from the main road to my place, but apparently that simple fact was about to spark a war. It started out as a joke. I mean, come on, police at my door over tree branches that were a good 20 feet from her precious border. I even laughed with the officer. But the next day I found a bright red notice taped to my door, something about aesthetic violations, and my non-compliant mailbox, like Denise was testing how far she could flex. Buddy sniffed at the paper, probably thinking it was the weirdest fetch I'd ever thrown his way. Thursday afternoon, I'm out there trimming some actual overgrown branches when I hear her behind me marching across her lawn, finger outstretched, launching into a tirade about bringing down neighborhood standards and threatening to call the city. I told her straight up her rules didn't apply to me, but she'd already spun on her heel, storming back like she owned every square inch from here to the horizon. That was mistake number one. See, after a decade at City Hall, I know a thing or two about property records. I pulled up the same mapping system I used on the job, traced the boundaries, and well, let's just say I grinned for the first time in weeks. My house was a solid 50 feet outside the HOA. She had zero claim, no matter how loud she got. But I had no clue how far she'd go. Instead of backing down, Denise dialed it up vague complaints on the community bulletin board, a newsletter warning about problem residents and noise complaints. Guess who had a golden retriever? Every morning brought another violation: paint color porch decor, even my firewood pile. I started wondering if I'd missed some fine print in the purchase contract. Was there a hidden clause at night those doubts crept in and wouldn't let go? Then came the calls. Random times, always Denise buddies barking leaves from my trees, my car parked at the wrong angle. She once called to complain that Buddy sneezed too loud. I asked if she was going to fine him for allergies. She talked right over me, just kept pushing. Then came the incident reports, official-looking listing every infraction she could dream up. Buddy's bark, fallen leaves, my garbage cans on the curb. Every violation dated, timestamp signed. The breaking point was a Sunday morning sun just creeping over the porch. I'm sipping coffee with Buddy sprawled at my feet when Denise marches out with a black garbage bag, walks straight across the lawn, and dumps it at the edge of my driveway, then shouts about trashy neighbors. I just stared, arms crossed, watching her hustle back like she'd won some battle. That night, everything shifted. Met a neighbor, Rachel, while Buddy was nosing around her garden. She kept her voice low, moved a wind chime out of the way like she was dodging a bug. Turns out Denise wasn't new to this. Rachel called her the smiling executioner, said 3 families had been run off in 5 years. And curiously, every complaint against Denise vanished from the records after her targets moved away. Her husband, a former HOA board member, tried to check, nothing. Files gone, scrubbed clean. Rachel was scared, but she made one thing clear: if I was going to fight, I needed to document everything, so I did. My dining room table became a war room: maps, property deeds, legal docs, highlighters everywhere. Late one night I found it, the HOA's claimed boundary extended 100 feet beyond what was recorded at the county. Denise was swinging a sword she didn't own. Called my old friend Buddy at the land office. He took one look and whistled. They've overstepped big time. He dug up the original 1970s easement agreements. The road was a public right-of-way guaranteed access for all properties, HOA or not. File this federally before you confront them, he said. Don't let it disappear. It took a week, but when the stamps and seals came back, I felt like I just loaded David's slingshot. But Denise wasn't done. She had given herself unchecked power. Minutes from HOA meetings showed her acting as judge, jury, executioner. Financial records were a mess, legal fees everywhere, no details. I spent a Saturday in a building that smelled like dust and disco searching for the original subdivision plans. Buried in a folder from 1973, there it was, the boundary ending a full acre short of my property, and deed restrictions guaranteeing road access for all future development. The law was on my side, plain as day. But she didn't flinch. Certified mail landed on my porch lawsuit for $15,000, disturbing community peace. Denise and her crew showed up, legal guns blazing. Their list of charges was almost comical: trespassing every time I drove home, Buddy's noise, falling leaves as an environmental hazard. The attorney pushed a settlement, $25,000 permanent road surrender, public apology to the HOA. I laughed, told them I'd need my lawyer to look it over. Denise looked shocked. Most people must have folded by then. So I lawyered up Harold Miller sharp, honest, fearless. But when we dug up the records to cement our case, a crucial plat map page was missing, gone. If this goes to a friendly judge, we're fine, Harold muttered. But if Denise has legal connections, brace yourself. I remembered utility companies keep their own maps, dug through engineering surveys until I found it. The road permanent public easement, right there in black and white. I laughed alone in that dusty room, holding proof that would sink their ship. The hearing was a circus. Neighbors filled every seat, some there for the drama. Karen Clipboard Queen stood by the camera, arms folded, counting heads. Denise and her lawyer painted me as the boogeyman, uncooperative, noisy dog property, values ruined. But when Harold and I rolled out our evidence, official maps, deeds, city correspondence, the mood shifted. When a neighbor shouted, "Wait, so our whole block isn't even in the HOA," you could feel the ground shift under Denise's feet. The bombshell came when Harold exposed the missing files, the selective deletion of complaints, the cover-up. Even the judge had to hear it twice to believe it. And when the county registrar confirmed our documents, Denise cracked, snapped about outdated maps. But her own records nailed the coffin shut. The judge ruled the road a public easement. The HOA had no standing, and icing on the cake, ordered them to pay my legal fees and damages with a federal investigation into their finances. The courtroom buzzed as the neighborhood realized the whole regime was a paper tiger. Afterward, people I'd never met thanked me. Some shared their own battles, suddenly emboldened. Within days, the HOA board collapsed, the website went dark, and the story went viral. The old guard resigned. At a final community meeting, residents demanded refunds. Denise slipped out the back door, her reign over. 6 months later, financial ruin forced Denise to sell, replaced by a young couple who asked my advice on flowers and paint colors. I put up a sign, "Private property, not part of your HOA." By noon, it was a meme shared by folks from here to Florida. Hardware stores sold out of the signs, and I started getting emails from everywhere. You know I didn't win because I shouted the loudest. I won because I knew where the real lines were and I stood my ground. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying enough. The real lesson: power only works when you don't question it. If you ever find yourself up against a bully with a gavel or a ruler, remember facts and guts go further than fear. Now I still check my mailbox twice, and I keep all my records locked up tight because power never disappears, it just waits for another chance. But around here the leaves can fall without a lawsuit, and people talk over the fence again like neighbors ought to. If you got a story like mine, I want to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me about your own neighborhood war. Maybe someone else out there needs to know they're not alone. And if you think justice matters more than keeping the peace, hit that share button. See you on the next one.